Amanda, you raised your hand. Let's bring you in. What's going on for you?
Hi. I'm struggling a lot with inference questions. I've spent probably the most of my time studying for the LR section on them. And the ones that I guess might seem harder that have like a lot of different diagrams or conditionals, I studied like diagramming those and I can get those very quickly. It's the ones that you can't necessarily diagram that I have a really hard time doing. So I guess I'm wondering, what do you think would be the best strategy for those? Because I don't think it's a lack of like studying them enough. I think I'm not studying it correctly.
Sure. So when you spend a lot of time, how are you approaching them?
I'm doing a lot of drilling questions, and I'm spending time like going back to all of the inference questions when I do a time section or even a practice test on them. And sometimes even after they've given me the correct answer, I just don't see how they came to that conclusion.
Yeah, I hear you. Do you try to pre-phrase?
On the inference questions, yes, but I feel like I can only do that when I have a diagram.
Yeah.
When I've written out a diagram.
I hear that. Yeah. I mean, that definitely lends itself more to diagramming. In the absence of pre-phrasing, what's your next step?
I go through each one individually. So these questions tend to take me the longest. And I think I'll like go through each question individually and try to see if it makes sense. And then usually I just answer like a trap answer because I'm confused.
Where do these questions fall within this section? Like what number question are they?
It's not even necessarily like the most difficult in the middle. It can just be like any of the inference questions.
Yeah. I mean, in the absence of a pre-phrase, it might just be evaluating the choices. It could simply be checking each one against the stimulus to see if it is a reasonable inference, to see if it's supported by the stimulus. In the absence of pre-phrase, there's not really much else to do. If you can see a connection between two parts, that's fantastic. As you said, formal logic lends itself to that very neatly. In other cases, it might just be connecting two parts in a non-formal logic way if there is some degree of overlap between two different parts. There, for example, there's one question where it talks about 500 million years in one section of it and then 100 million years in a different section of it. And due to the context of that question, there is overlap between those two facts because there's no overlap in terms of their time ranges. And so it's possible to make an inference on that basis. But again, could just be scanning through the choices, looking for matches.
Okay.
One thing I'll say is, I'll ask you is, do you check the choices against each other ever?
Sometimes when I'm only down to two, but not necessarily.
Okay. Yeah. I would recommend really just more review of those. Okay. There's not really a magic technique for those sorts of questions, but I will refer you to what I call the Socratic review method. And the Socratic review method is a method of really digging deep into your understanding of why you get something wrong or why you have difficulty with something. And when it comes to tempting wrong answers and discouraging right answers, there's a lot to play with there.
Okay. And also, for the other questions, I'll maybe get like one or two other question types wrong or in general. But sometimes I won't, it'll just be inference. So obviously I'm aiming to get 0 wrong in a section, but if it's taking away time from studying bigger things or it's taking up too much of my time, should I just be okay knowing, okay, I can probably get 2 inferences wrong and then that'll be it? And then should I just kind of move on from that?
Well, inference questions come up quite a bit. So they're not a type I would write off. Like, let's say we're playing the triage game and the exam's coming up pretty soon and you want to spend less time on something. Let's spend less time on the things that give you the most trouble that are the least frequent. So balance the most difficulty with this, and it happens to come up it's fairly uncommon. Is there a type like that comes to mind for you that you might want to put aside to focus on other things?
Not necessarily. I don't think so.
Okay. Well, if inference is what comes up for you, then I would say stick with it because it actually is one of the most common logical reasoning question types. You have must be true, most strongly supported being the most common manifestations of that. You also have cannot be true. Okay. If there were a type that many people might want to put aside, I would say parallel reasoning and parallel flaw are, for many people, extremely difficult and fairly rare, to the point that I wouldn't invest tons of time on that if there are more common things that also give you trouble. So anybody who has trouble with both inference and parallel reasoning might want to spend more time on inference.
Okay.
But when's your test date?
I'm shooting for end of August, but I can also do October if I'm not 100% confident yet.
Yeah, either way, August versus October, you still have plenty of time to work on inference, and you will organically come across a lot of them, even in the context of doing individual sections and full-length exams.
Okay.
Anything else going on for you we could support you on?
Just logic game in general, not so much on accuracy, but just on timing. When I started, I could only do like 2 games and maybe not even that. And now I can do 3 games regularly. And my accuracy is about like 0 to 2 wrong on the 3 games that I am doing. But even if I have time left over, it's like 30 seconds max. And I feel like I'm already pushing the limit of how fast I can do the games. So I don't know how to make that jump to a 4th game.
Yeah, it's a common situation, 3 games versus 4. Anybody on the call right now have any support for Amanda or any ideas for Amanda around the getting to that 4th game and solving it with sufficient time?
Just a tip from like my perspective. It might seem like counterintuitive, but if you work on the easier games and you can get like shortcuts and things like that, and just like almost like understanding like the patterns, then like you can get to a place where those are shorter and you have time for the longer games. Like it's not fair to think to yourself that you have to get every single game done in 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Like some are going to be less, some are going to be more. And just like understanding that and like being patient with yourself.
Okay. Yeah. I definitely noticed that like for sequencing, I do those shorter, but because it's so much easier for me, I haven't spent enough time practicing. And I guess you're right. If I do that and I can get those down to like 6 minutes or 7 minutes, and I have more time for the harder ones. Thank you.
That is exactly right. So 8:45 is simply an average. I would never time individual games because they vary in difficulty. Some games that are easier could take as little as 6 minutes. That's actually realistic for a lot of games. And other games may take 11 minutes or 12 minutes, and that's perfectly fine. So, for example, let's say the Birds in the Forest game, test 33 game 2. That is a difficult conditional in-out game. It's difficult in general, but in the world of the LSAT, that's actually a relatively easier game where anybody with enough studying could get that down to 6 minutes. However, a tougher game like the CDs game, Test 31 Game 2, featured in Legally Blonde with the used in new CDs, that game, it's totally fine. And if that takes 11 or 12 minutes for anybody on a first look, I can show you ways to get it faster, but looking at it cold, 11, 12 minutes, totally reasonable. So never time individual games. And best, if you're doing them timed, I would say only do it in the context of a timed 35-minute section, or more if you've got extra time, but do it under realistic test day conditions, only the 4 games in the section as it's published.
Okay.
Practice like game day, especially in this final month for August.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thanks for playing, Amanda. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.